Bitcoin is coming off the back of its second highest ever weekly close last week. This is a clear sign of strength from the bulls. The bulls have been able to hold key support and they have been able to break through what was key resistance. It seems very, very evident that the bulls are now in control of this market and now have the opportunity to run Bitcoin to new all-time highs sooner rather than later. So let's jump into the charts and see what the latest outlook is now for Bitcoin. If I just sort of go down to the chart I shared on the last video where I actually had a path on for Bitcoin. It's this one here. Then you can see this is really my idea for the latest path for Bitcoin. This is currently my highest probability scenario, is that Bitcoin lightly comes up and either tags these highs or makes a slightly higher high this side of the summer. I think this is a real possibility. We're so close now. Like I say, we are closing candles well within the range of current all-time highs, expecting now that we will go higher. And from there, I'm expecting probably some consolidation over the summer for the markets to probably quieten down a bit. And then maybe a potential final flush in September before Bitcoin either puts in a lower high, or if the market gets really, really bullish, I can see Bitcoin putting in a higher high, maybe coming as high as 120,000 into the end of the year, maybe even up to 130,000, which is where we've got this 1.618 Fibonacci extension target. Now, you might ask me, well, if we take out these highs here, won't we just keep going higher and higher and higher, 120, 130K, maybe within the next month, and then off to much, much higher price targets? I just think this market is going to take a lot of liquidity to really push up to those much higher prices. Bitcoin has come a very, very long way in a very short space of time. Obviously, if we look a couple of years ago, back in late 2022, this is when I was heavily accumulating Bitcoin myself down at these low prices. FTX had just gone down. Everybody was getting super bearish, and it was a very, very obvious setup for me, just based on how negative the sentiment was, how bad the news was, that this was the time to really, really get fully invested, fully all in the market. And now, obviously, we are towards the tail end of the bear market. I really do think this market does not have much further to go. We're seeing more and more bullish pieces of news coming out. The latest one is the company, I think they're called 21, have been purchasing Bitcoin, average price of 95,000. So obviously you've got now 21, which are adopting a similar playbook, I believe, to MicroStrategy, or now Strategy, Michael Saylor's company. You've also got GameStop, I think, as well. There's a couple of firms in the Far East that are adopting a similar playbook. So you've got these institutions getting in now, making obviously big purchases. But I just think to myself, like, how long is that going to last? How much capital is there going to be left to flow into this market? Certainly at this point, I think to actually get an extended move beyond the all-time highs makes more sense when liquidity has come back into the market, when some of these buyers in here that have sort of chased this price above 100K, when they get shaken out a final time. I'm sure if we do actually lose 90K again, people will start to say it's over, and that could potentially be the trap. I mean, we don't need to go that low. Potentially we find support from this 50 moving average, and actually this ends up being a slightly tighter consolidation with some sort of fake outs either side, and we just come back to around about sort of like the 90K level, and then we see a more explosive sort of blow off top into the end of the year. So I'm still thinking that ultimately all of this will end up being a form of distribution, and I'm reluctant to get overly bullish right here at what I believe is fairly late on in the crypto cycle. But could we be doing something different? Could we see potentially something similar to last year happen this year, whereby we just kind of step higher, move up to 130, come back down towards 100K, find that as support and we go into what would be known as some sort of super cycle with the ETFs, with the institutions behind, I guess anything can happen. And you have to be open to that as a scenario. And that's why I would say it's never a good idea to sell all of your Bitcoin. Obviously, take profits along the way, but it's important, I think, to have some exposure at all times. And certainly, I have a lot less exposure right now than I did say back in last year when I was fully invested. I was fully expecting us to break higher. Now I think, whereas last year I was as close to 100% sure as possible that we would get a breakout higher from this consolidation. I would put the odds at probably around 90% sure. Here, I'm probably 60-70% sure we do make a new all-time high this year, at least in terms of printing higher prices above this sort of, we call it 109,000. But do I see us making significantly higher highs this year? Do I see us going to significantly higher targets? I mean, I personally consider a breakout of a consolidation to be a gain of 20% or greater outside of that range, outside of that sort of pattern. Do we actually see us taking out 116,000 and finding acceptance and then pushing on higher from here? I'm not too sure. I'm just really not too sure. I'd give it 50-50 right now. And for me to be sort of high conviction, like all in on a market, I need much, much greater odds than a 50-50. I need to be, like I say, 80-90% confident that the market is going to go in my direction. I need to be leaning on real solid fundamentals that I believe are going to push this much, much, much higher over the next couple of years. I need to be in it for at least a 2x, preferably a 3-4x. Can I see Bitcoin going to 200,000, 300,000 over the next couple of years? Not without a decent period of consolidation and reset. And I just don't think we've seen it yet. I think there needs to be probably some retesting of lower prices and for this market to come down. Usually the bear markets tag our 200-week moving average, which is currently down at around about 47,000. The last one actually came down and tagged the 300-week moving average. This chart is not the best example, this Binance Tether chart, believe it or not, but obviously we can see it on this chart. So at some point I'm thinking, look, these are between 50 and 40,000. Obviously I had said if we went into a bear market, that would be the area that I'd be interested in accumulating Bitcoin at. That's where you make your generational Bitcoin buys. It's not at prices up here, it's going to be at lower prices. And I'm happy to be patient. I'm happy to be a bit stubborn on waiting for those prices to come. And I think we are probably following something similar to what we did back in 2021. Now here in 2025, we might get a little bit higher in here. Everybody starts to get very bullish. Everybody says, well, we've still got another 6 months of the bull run to come. And then people just use these institutions buying your Michael Saylors, your 21s as exit liquidity to kind of sell into. Obviously, there's a lot of big Bitcoin whales out there with a lot of Bitcoin that will probably be looking to offload and buy back in some sort of crypto bear market. So, have we seen, I guess the question is, have we seen enough euphoria? Have we seen enough explosive price action? Have we got to prices that are completely unsustainable, which is when we usually see the big drops? And it's very, very hard to say right now because Bitcoin seems to be fairly comfortable in this price range. So, you never know what's around the corner. You never know what the narrative will be or what will actually cause this type of breakdown in price. But look, I mean, for me, it's really, really clear here that, Bitcoin is bullish and we are likely to see new all-time highs, albeit if only slightly new all-time highs at some point this year, and I still believe we're in a distribution pattern. But part of the reason why I'm so convinced we will see new all-time highs for Bitcoin is obviously the high correlation with the stock market. The Nasdaq has been absolutely ripping. Obviously, fantastic result for the stock market buys that were made at the March and April lows. So those are up nicely right now. We are coming into an area of resistance on the Nasdaq. So I'd say this is probably the last chance that this market has to reject before it gets to new all-time highs. Certainly, if we start clearing this sort of 21,400, call it, then I think the Nasdaq is off to 22,000 and probably prints a new all-time high very, very quickly. So let's see what happens with the Nasdaq, but absolutely huge move so far this week, and it doesn't look like it wants to look back. The Nasdaq is notorious for absolutely destroying shorts when it really starts to get going. The S&P, so obviously the S&P path hasn't really changed for me. I still feel at some point at this resistance, obviously with all the hype from the China deal and the trade deals and the investment deals that Trump is doing, they still have these tariffs. These tariffs are not going away. There are still tariffs in place. That is going to hinder global trade and potentially could provide an inflation uptick. However, today we did see an inflation print come in lower than forecasted. If it was only by 0.01%, but still it is something positive. Of course, bulls are going to cling to whatever they can, and it's natural that the market has got a bit of continuation today off the back of that. So if we just go onto the daily chart, you can see massive day yesterday, and we're above our 200-day moving average now. So, and we're above this previous high as well before the sell-off. So a lot of like sort of more technical damage or not really damage, more repair or technical process for the bulls here, progress, sorry, for the bulls here. So yeah, potentially I think over the summer, like I say, we could go a bit higher. Maybe we do come up, retest the all-time highs. Then maybe reality sets in. We still have these tariffs lingering. We still have concerns around inflation. We still don't have any rate cuts yet. The Fed is still doing QT. So we can definitely come down a bit lower, but I think the positioning from here, like I say, even I was positioned short. Those were hedge shorts, so they weren't naked shorts. So I still had lots of long stock exposure. I literally hedged around about 20% of my portfolio on those shorts. Obviously, all that meant is I had a drag for every 5% my portfolio goes up, there's a drag of 1%. So it's like I've got a 20% drag on my portfolio. I did release those shorts yesterday. So obviously I didn't get too stung by this. And in fact, it's been good for my portfolio, of course, having such been so heavily invested in stocks. But obviously I do think at some point we will come down and probably fill in some of these inefficiencies, retest some support. Potentially we hit this trend line. Potentially we come down later on in the year and tag this trend line again. So because I think, look, if we get back here, everybody's going to be just so bullish. Nobody's going to want to miss the breakout to new all-time highs. And I think at that point we should get a opportunity for some downside, and that'll be a fantastic time to buy it, because potentially if you buy in here, who says this has to happen? Potentially that just ends up being something like that. And we come up and tag new all-time highs in the summer, and potentially from there we come down and we actually make a lower high. We just come back. We might even just come back into the low of this range, or maybe just down to this support here, and then off we go. So that would be your classic sort of V-shaped reversal, which is very much on the cards. So yeah, I'm not 100% sure how this is going to go, but I'm pretty damn certain that at some point this year, the stock market will take out its all-time highs. And obviously, this is going to be risk on. This is going to be good for Bitcoin. This is going to be obviously good for cryptos as well. So I think the difficulty is that when this drop does happen, this next drop does happen, everything's going to take a hit. Like I say, if we go into September and we get a more nasty drop, then a lot of assets are going to take a hit, including Bitcoin, including crypto. We do know that stocks tend to trend up, cryptos tend to trend down, but then they get these massive, massive explosive moves that come once every 4 years for a period of a few weeks. And obviously, we're seeing um, signs of that right now. We've seen a massive move in Ethereum up to 2,700, I believe, today. So look, it's one of those things where they're risky to hold, but also you can make some massive, massive upside by holding them. So I'm not going to tell anybody, don't go out and buy your favorite altcoin. If you've got an altcoin that you have very, very high conviction in, then definitely maybe you want to hold it this year. But for me personally, I'm not looking to take that risk at this stage in the cycle. I'm happy to have Bitcoin exposure even this year, still to all-time highs. And like I say, when we go up to all-time highs, I will be starting to cover. I will be selling a bit more. I'll be very, very cautious at these levels. I'm not expecting a complete rip higher to much, much, much higher prices this year, but I can see us going up to sort of 120, 130,000 at some point and looking to put in some sort of peak or some sort of blow off or some sort of distribution at a slightly higher range to the range we're in right now. But I'm not expecting a massive, massive sort of extended move higher to some of the price targets other people have been floating around. I just don't think there is the appetite or the volume or the demand for Bitcoin at the moment outside of a few institutions. I think the majority of people front run this cycle, and that's why we've seen prices really, really stall out early this year because there was just too much front running. And I think now what we're seeing is just a recovery bounce, a short squeeze. Obviously, volume isn't really coming in or kicking in the same way it had done last time. We really started to go to the upside. You'd really be expecting volume to be rising here, and it's just not. It's just tailing off. I mean, that's on Binance, this on Coinbase. I mean, you really expect volume to be a lot higher here. So how much of this is actually spot buying, and how much of this is, shorts getting squeezed and people being, just not being well positioned for higher prices, and therefore having to reposition, having to exit shorts, etc. So just something to bear in mind. I'm still very, very cautious here. Cautiously optimistic. I do think we can go higher. Apologies, I do have a bit of a cold at the moment, so not feeling or sounding my best. But what I will say is we did explore a more bearish path last time. I'm giving this a lower probability right now, just due to the fact that Bitcoin is showing real strength here, and the fact that the stock market is really showing strength as well. I do think new all-time highs for stocks come, and I think it's less likely we do something like this. But you never know. You never know. I'm thinking this probably is a good place over the next couple of years, if you look on the long term, to take a little bit of profit off the table. Like I say, I do think at some point we do come down and test these moving averages over the next year or two. It's just all the $1 million question is when do we actually make that move lower? Because obviously that's when you want to be in cash, so you have cash to obviously buy that dip. And then the stock market, like I say, I'm absolutely not ruling out this type of move here to new all-time highs over the next couple of weeks, but I do still expect the summer to be fairly choppy, fairly slow, with shakeouts both sides, and possibly resolution higher later on in the year, when I think the narrative will probably shift away from tariffs and will shift more towards things like tax cuts, things like some of the new jobs, the new investments, potentially the new Fed chair coming in, who will start, I believe, in May next year. I think Powell leaves around about May next year, so potentially there'll be more rate cuts. Potentially QT will finish, there'll be QE, and I think this could really, really send stocks much, much higher into the end of the year, and that's why I think crypto could also have a good Q4. So I'm going to wrap it up there. Thanks for bearing with me on this one, and thanks a lot for watching. And yeah, if you did like the video, please do hit the like and subscribe if not done so already. And I'll be back very, very soon with another update. Have a great one. Cheers for now.